Shots, third parties. So sometimes we call that triangulating. So you're not listening to me, so I'm going to get somebody else to talk to you. Withholding is a form of manipulation. But it's a very big one in the sneaky department because you give in to me or I'm going to withhold something from you. So you drag up the past to add to your argument. So what's that one is about is sometimes when you're a fight person, you don't want to go into the war without as many weapons as possible. And so these are all different types of weapons that you could use if you needed to. And often in the fight, you'll start with one, and if that doesn't have the effect, then you begin to amp it up. Okay? Another huge one is disrespect the person. And that can be by calling them names or just treating them with disrespect. Okay? Another one is sarcasm. And another one is push their buttons. So do everything you know that will piss them off. Yeah, some of what Brenda was saying is that you just you find fault with everything. It doesn't matter what they do, you'll find fault. Okay, how many are fight specialists? Okay, how many go to flight then to fight? Let me give you another flight one, and it can go with the freeze, but it's where you feel guilty or you take responsibility for all the problems that are happening. So instead of calling it as it is, I just say it's all my fault, all my fault. I'm sorry I did this wrong, I did this wrong, I've been more sensitive, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and that's where somebody can then use that against you in all the arguments. So the next time they twist everything, it's easy. If you've been more sensitive, etc., I wouldn't have got anything. Okay, now let me show you something. How many of you have kind of some past relationships you can quickly bring to your mind? Many flight people get in a relationship with the fight people. Anybody relate to that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So how does that work?
Why don't you say what you're thinking?
One of us wants to avoid
Something's
one
wrong,
of us
but why
wants
don't
to-
you just say what it is?
Yeah.
I know something's wrong.
Very well acted. I'm sure it would have had a little more volume.
Oh, yeah. Or I'd get so frustrated and mad, I'd just leave. I'd be like, I can't not argue.
Okay, so do you see that these actually end up feeding each other? The more this person fights, the more this fights. The more they fight, the more angry this person gets and fights and chases. Okay, so what we're going to look at when we get to the healthy, there's a healthy form of withdrawal. That's not flight. It's just to cool down, to get perspective, but the goal is to come back and resolve it. But what happens with these is that nothing gets resolved. So what are the fears that drive fight, flight, freeze? Now we get to kind of what Jasmine's saying. So a flight person, why are they always running from conflict? What's their fear? So fear of consequences, that could be negative. Okay. So what you're, Jasmine, describing is somebody's afraid that if they enter a conflict with you, that you're going to get so mad the relationship will end. So they're afraid of being abandoned.
I do get that mad.
Yeah. So they're running and trying to not have any conflict because this tactic isn't working. They're them avoiding, and now they have to go to, I gotta try and stop. That makes sense? So do you see that what happens here is nothing gets resolved? That's what I want you to understand, okay? But it's really driven by a fear. Fear of getting hurt, or fear of being abandoned mainly, or fear of being caught. Okay, so what happens with the fight, flight, freeze method of dealing with conflict, which basically is you never resolve anything, okay? it ends up starting a cycle that just continues round and round. Okay, so you have at the top the conflict. And then after the conflict, what are the emotions of the two different parties usually? Remorse of some kind. So there's a bit of remorse. Okay, then there's the honeymoon. So everybody wants to be on their best behavior, kiss and make up, be nicey-nicey, all of that. And that proves to yourself that everything's fixed, that everything's good again, and this is a really good relationship. Okay, with me? So what happens then as new problems begin to happen, or new stresses to the relationship? Usually, you don't want to mess up the honeymoon, right? You want to keep that feeling happening. So what you try to do is either deny or stuff it down. Okay? But what's happening as you do that is pressure's building. So here we have kind of the freeze or the flight. Both can happen. Pressure's building, and then finally it explodes again. And this is where some people, as the pressure's building, they start to go into the sneaky. So I'm not going to explode right away. I'm going to start taking little shots. I'm going to start doing little things to disrespect them or throw stuff in their face. And all of that response is just causing the pressure to build even more, because now you're hurting each other subtly. Okay, so the reality then that begins to happen is that over time, this cycle gets shorter and shorter. It takes less time to go through. So you used to maybe have a blow up once a month, and then it's less than that, less than that, less than that. And it gets harder and harder to kind of get to the honeymoon and stay frozen. So what can that's the second thing I'm going to say. What can happen for a person as they feel the pressure building? They can say, you know what, let's bring this conflict on just to get it over with so we can get back to the honeymoon. So they can actually start to sabotage. So they take the sneaky, they take the pushing buttons up a notch just because they want to get to the conflict and get it over with so they can get back to the honeymoon. So that takes us to what we saw a couple weeks ago. And that's just this very pronounced sine curve. And so you have the honeymoon up here. And as you feel it go downhill, you can sabotage it to bring on a crisis, which will take it back to the honeymoon. Okay, let me show you something else. So, how many of you have found the more intense the crisis, the greater the honeymoon afterwards? So what you end up doing is creating an even more deep curve to get greater and greater crisis to get a better and better high. And it really follows an addiction type pattern. So it plays off fear, it plays off intensity, because once you make up after such an intense crisis, there's very intense emotions involved, which gives a greater high. And so what can happen in the early days of this is there's still a certain amount of respect for each other, okay? But over time, what you begin to do is there's greater disrespect or lack of respect. So the hurt is getting greater and greater. So after a while, you don't even care about a honeymoon. You care about hurting them. So that becomes the shift in the focus is after a while of this, you can't even get to a honeymoon anymore, and they bug you so much, you just want to hurt them as much as possible. So you can even bring conflict on just because you want to hurt them. Any of you ever wake up looking for a good fight?
Yep.
Okay, next thing. This is a really important one to see up front before we get into specifics. Okay, so one person, so let's say you're the one that wants to resolve it and your partner doesn't. Okay? So you're apologizing and you're trying to make everything right. Okay, so what I want you to see is that the party that doesn't want to resolve it, they're going to take everything you use and twist it and make you the bad guy. Okay? Often, how many of you have been in that kind of relationship where you're crying and trying to resolve it, and they just keep disrespecting you till they just beat you down? Until you just give in total, that kind of total I give up, whatever. And so that's where they're actually going to use your good attitudes to hurt you more. So what I find for most people in recovery that get into relationships is that usually one person wants to resolve it, the other one's back in the problem and doesn't care, etc. And so the one person that wants to resolve it, they're just working, pouring their heart out, working so hard to make it happen, and it's just getting used again. So what you'll find though is, for them this becomes a power game, and they must be in the position of the greatest power. So they have to be in a position where they're always winning, where they're always putting you down, you're always the problem, they're better than you, all of that kind of stuff has to be there for them. But if you go to walk away from the relationship, then what do? So the other thing that they might do, besides manipulating you to get back, is to sabotage any changes in you. So they might say, I don't like the new you. I wish you'd be like the old you. You're a lot more fun. That kind of stuff. Because they want, what's really happening here is you have a set of rules or dynamics in the relationship. They're always right, you're always wrong. Okay? You're trying to change the rules. And they don't like that. So they're going to try to sabotage that so you go back to the old rules. So that's where the more you try to stick to your guns, if manipulating doesn't work, sabotaging doesn't work, then it usually begins to turn abusive. And often with that cycle, the conflict at the top, so we saw the cycle usually gets shorter and shorter. The second thing that usually happens is the conflict gets more intense, and potentially more abusive. So it might be verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, and then move to physical abuse. But there's usually always an intensifying of the outburst. Okay? Anything else that, as you look back, what happens when you're wanting to change and they don't? What are some of the tactics or games they play in that type of setting? Like the piece I really want you to hear is doesn't matter what you say, they will twist it and use it against you. You will always be the bad guy. You will always be blamed. And so what you get to a point where you realize, okay, a relationship can never resolve anything if only one person wants to make changes. But then that takes you to a deeper thing. Then if they don't want to change, then I guess I have to leave. And that takes it up to a new level. Because then they'll change their tactics, but it'll also confront your fear of being all alone. And so that's where different types of things kick in at that point, which we'll get to later. Okay? So they make comparisons, but the comparisons are designed to put you in the worst place. Right? Because what's happening as that cycle goes around, you're losing respect for the other person, number one, but you're building a resentment, number two. And so as those get bigger and bigger, then there's no honeymoon. It just all begins to disappear. Okay, let's take a break. The conclusion that most complex trauma children reach by the time they get into their teens is that all conflict is bad. Anybody relate to that? So why would you make that conclusion?
Doesn't get resolved.
Okay. So usually instead of getting resolved, you end up getting more hurt. So somebody always has to pay, somebody always has to be hurt from it. So instead of resolving stuff, it actually makes things worse. Okay? And for many, it actually adds to their shame. So you're put down, you're disrespected, you're made to feel that you're the problem. And so in complex trauma, that result of complex trauma of shame, which says I'm the problem, I'm no good, not good enough, not lovable, conflict just adds more of that feeling. And so many kids growing up in complex trauma, time to get their teens, their brain computer says nothing has ever been resolved properly. How are things usually resolved within a complex trauma home if there's conflict? They said they were resolved because dad always won, or mom always won, and the kids always were the bad guys. And so that's what your whole concept is that if a conflict is resolved, it's not really resolved. You just take the blame, you take the punishment, all of that. So more hurt, more pain, more shame, all of those things. So to the kids from a healthy home, conflict's not bad. Conflict is actually a good thing.
It's to resolve.
Exactly. So it always leads to a better relationship. Whereas complex trauma, it always leads to worse.
That's
And so that becomes the huge difference. And so you gotta, for complex trauma, you gotta work through a whole bunch of layers of defenses and twisted distortions before you can actually get to a point of resolving. So just for example, if you have tons and tons of shame and you are always put down, the fear of that person in conflict is I'm gonna get put down again. So their commitment is, if there's a conflict, never lose. So it doesn't matter what the topic is, you have to win. So it's me against you, and one of us is going to lose, and it's not going to be me. So I'll use every dirty tactic I can think of, every distorted piece of logic I can use, so that I end up winning. So now you're not even discussing the real issue, it's all about win or lose. And so conflict becomes that win-lose thing, and that never resolves it. But to get them to be willing to say, okay, I can lose, that scares them to death. Because then you're going to make fun of me, you're going to put me down, blah, blah, blah. And so that becomes super, super hard to get past. Okay, so what I want you to, where we're going to go next is there's different types of conflict or causes. Some are very healthy, very good, very natural, okay? So let me give you an example. Cause number one. So my wife is in the kitchen there, she can hear all of this.
Be careful!
You can reveal her eyes.
I could give you a whole list of examples here, so I gotta figure out which one I'm gonna use. So when I watch a movie, the higher the body count, the better, okay? My wife likes these mushy, sappy, dribbly, romantic movies. We could have a lot of conflict over that. Is one of us wrong and the other right?
Yes.
No, it's just we're different, right? Okay, so let me give you an example. Fold your hands like this. How many have your left thumb on top? Isn't that interesting? Half the group. So is one right and the other wrong?
Yeah.
No, one's right and the other's left.
Such a dad joke.
Must be.
So, just different. So what conflict in that situation does is it pushes you to either reach a compromise. So we'll watch slice and dice some movies once in a while and mushy romantic ones once in a while. Or we'll just have to accept each other and agree that we're different. So I'm a morning person, my wife's a night owl. We got married, I want to go to bed early, she wants to stay up. We got to sort it out. And so the conflict there isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're working towards finding a compromise and accepting the other person. Different values. Now becomes a very important conflict, and it's harder sometimes to resolve it. So let's say that you were raised in a family where they never spent money frivolously at all. Any extra money went into saving, investment. That was the priority, save for the future. But your partner comes from a family where as long as they got enough money to pay the bills, they spend everything else on just having fun. So you get into a relationship and the one's trying to save every penny and you're just wanting to have a lot of fun. Conflict, but a different value system. Do you see that? Okay, any other different type of value systems that can lead to conflict? Religion is a big one. So let me give you a couple other different value things, okay? So you might have a partner that's very much into their image. They got to look good. You don't care about that at all. You can go into public with a wrinkly shirt and slops all down the front of you, that kind of stuff. You're going to have a lot of conflict. And that's just a different value system at that level, okay? So that intimate relationship expose differences of values. Religion, money, all those things. Another big one is you want to have children who have very firm boundaries and very rigid boundaries. Your partner just let the kids grow up and have fun. And you're going to have constant conflict over the discipline of the children, that kind of stuff. Okay, make sense? Misunderstandings. So this one again, nobody's done anything wrong. So let's say your partner says, meet me at 10 o'clock, I'm going to go to Walmart, meet me at 10 o'clock here, and you heard 11 o'clock. They're there waiting for an hour until you show up, they're furious, and you honestly didn't hear it. Now don't try using that excuse too much if you're lying about it. But misunderstandings are, you pick up the kids after school and they didn't hear you as they were running out the door and the kids are left. So those things happen. That's just part of being human. Unrealistic expectations. Now the trick with unrealistic expectations is you usually don't communicate them. You just think they should know. And that adds to the kind of the conflict, as you should have known, but it's often that your expectation is unrealistic. What I see in a lot of relationships from people with complex trauma is there's really a double standard. They can be immature, they can make mistakes, but their partner has to be perfect, and their partner always has to be on their game, and the mature one. And so that unrealistic expectation can really cause a lot of conflict. Okay, and then the fifth one is just good old selfishness. I want what I want, when I want it, and you're not cooperating with my program. Okay, so this one is definitely conflict that comes from a very wrong place. This one can come from just you don't know any better, or that's how you were raised, whatever, and that can be dealt with. These ones are much more just that's life. You're going to have them. And then this one is an important one as far as learning to grow in intimacy. So what I want you to hear is this. Conflict is part of life, part of any relationship. You cannot avoid it. If you have the right tools, it can turn into a good thing. It can lead to a stronger, better relationship. If you don't have the tools, it leads to a worse relationship with more tension. Okay, now what I want to do is kind of take this list and just get you to think about what are the most common conflict topics. or issues in a relationship. So number one, couples or relationships fight more about money than anything else, typically. Okay? Second, most frequent conflict area is trust, jealousy.
Responsibilities.
All right, very good. So that sometimes goes by roles. So typically in old school, women did certain jobs around the house, men did certain jobs. That was clearly defined. But if you get in a relationship now and you don't think that way, but the other one does, then you're going to have lots of different conflicts over who should be doing the laundry, who should be cooking the meals, etc., etc. Okay, let me just go back to the jealousy one because I think it's one of the bigger ones. But what is the root cause behind the jealousy one? It is that you will love somebody more than me. And so you're constantly, you got this radar that looks at how much time they spend with this person, how excited they get about spending time with this person, how much time they spend with me, etc. And if I fear that you're going to love somebody more than me, then I will create a lot of conflict. So that is a core root one, and that's really what's behind the whole shame thing. So shame produces lots of jealousy, because I'm pretty sure you're going to abandon me and find somebody better than me, but I'm going to fight you tooth and nail, and so it leads to all kinds of conflict in a relationship. And what would be connected to it, number 4 would be extended family or the in-laws, if you want to kind of use that term. And what the radar is there is who has more power in your life and decision making, your parents or me, or your brother or me. Who would you rather spend time with, your family or me? And so that can be a huge cause of conflict. And what often gets kind of done to create that mindset is blood is closer than anything else. So you always stick with your family, even over your partner or your kids. And that sets up for lots of conflict. Okay, what else would you include in this list? Most common topics of conflict. You've mentioned religion. And actually the next big one would be sex. If you're in a romantic type relationship. And then 7, which Carrie mentioned, is personality differences. And so what we've seen or talked about a lot is you're usually attracted to a quality, so somebody that's very lively and outgoing, and after a while you hate that part of them because it drives you nuts. Or somebody just flies by the seat of their pants, they're not super structured, you like their freedom, and then once you're in a relationship you hate that about them. Okay, I'm just going to, because it's an important one, character defects, but what I want you to see is sometimes we confuse the two. Okay? But yeah, back to personality difference, the introvert versus extrovert. The extrovert always wants people over, always wants to go out and do something. You just want to stay home by yourself. So one of the ones with personality, you can get somebody that's just very touchy-feely, likes lots of hugging, touching. The other one's got a super big bubble. Don't get in my bubble. That kind of thing. You'll get, just give you some others, you'll get people who are OCD, clean and tidy, with somebody that's quite messy. That's a big thing. You'll get somebody that's kind of ditzy blonde type versus somebody that's just very detail, anal about stuff. And that can drive each other crazy. Okay? Some have just a very interesting sense of humor that's almost twisted a little bit, and the others are very serious. So again, you get all kinds of personality differences that come out of that. Okay, next one. Their choice of friends. And often it's the power their friends still have over them that comes into play. Communication. You don't talk enough, you talk too much. You never open up, you never stop opening up. Just to come back, it's kind of joined with these. It's how they express emotions. So are they very reserved or are they out there? Emotions on their sleeve. So for a very reserved, they can be attracted to an emotionally out there person, but after a while it just is very annoying to them. The discipline of the children. Okay, and then 12, rituals or special events. How we celebrate Christmas, how we celebrate birthdays. So those are huge ones, like what traditions you're going to have on Christmas morning. Okay, any other topics that you can think of? There's a tricky one. It goes by the term transference. And what that means is your partner does something that looks like something your dad used to do. So you transfer your dad's motives, your dad's behavior, and you assume that's the same reason why your partner's doing it. So when you see your partner, you actually see your dad. So usually there's conflict and they haven't done anything wrong. It's just you overreact based on your history and your baggage. And that can do a lot of damage because in that moment, usually you can't be reasoned with and you've made up your mind at sight. So what we're going to look at tomorrow is what challenges does a complex trauma person have when it comes to conflict.